Again, my name is Howard Schurter, for those who have not met me before. My background, briefly, I am from Boston. I graduated Harvard College in degree in cultural anthropology, sociology, and psychology. Went into the service, served in Korea, and from there I came back and settled in New York. I went to Columbia Graduate Business School and have an MBA in international business. From that, I had several jobs and ended up with the IBM Corporation for 30 years in management, marketing, and education. I retired 13 years ago now and started a business with my wife, making and selling hair accessories for ladies and for little girls mostly. And we still do that. 8 years ago, I started talking to audiences in private organizations, in libraries, and assisted living, independent living facilities. And it's been very rewarding for me, and as it turns out, I think very rewarding for the audiences because they're stimulating. I try to pick stimulating topics filled with discussion. And my presentations are just that. They're not speeches per se. It's for you to participate because you have views and you have world experience, you have wisdom, and I think we should all share that. And that's really one of the goals I have in developing these topics and in presenting them, opening it up, really, because in our everyday life, we don't get to maybe talk about these things. We talk about prices of tomatoes, or we talk about the war in Iraq, or we talk about George Bush, or we talk about cooking or cards or golf scores, and sometimes it's desirable to stop and think of other things in a more wide sense. So that's my modus operandi, and that's why I've come here tonight again. Tonight's topic is women, their rise to power. Now, last time I spoke, we talked about, the last two topics here was the presidential election and then the consequences of the election, and that got kind of heated. So I figured I would come back and talk about something that might be less heated, but upon developing the topic, it can get, I think there are issues within it that can get heated, and they do reflect our political and philosophical struggle that we're in today in this world. So it really is very topical in that sense, and might lead to that some discussion or some disagreements within us or between us concerning some of the topics I'll bring out. I do have a philosophy of this topic, and that is women have not had power, and women have been secondary citizens, and maybe not even citizens, secondary people in this world, and still are in many populations. That has changed rapidly in many, many countries today, even though not as rapid as some might want it to have been. But that is a fact. And even in those advanced societies, such as ours, I will point out some things which indicate there's a pushback, that there's a pushback to put women, quote unquote, back in their place. And I will quote and show you where some people have actually said such things as that, okay? But let me develop the topic, and we'll get into the questions or the comments as we get into it to some extent. I have given you an outline, which I will follow to some extent, but it gives you an outline of the things, however, that are involved in this kind of a topic. I also gave you 2 pages of women who have been involved in our history of the world and of civilization. I started with antiquity and used biblical references, mythological references, historical, and women in the modern world. And many of them you may recognize, many of them you may want to know more about, and you can look that up on the internet or in libraries or what have you on your own, because each one has a value and each one has an impact on our lives and has been instrumental in many things. So, but let me start off with the history of civilization. Basically, most societies have been patriarchal, meaning men have ruled. Testosterone has ruled. For whatever reasons, and they are supposedly have been, women have been tied to child rearing and childbearing, and that's true. And that has been something which has been accepted and has permitted men to have freedom of hunting, leaving, or doing whatever they wish, and having obviously more physical power, generally dominating, because might makes right, no matter what we say or whatever laws we have. Might does historically make right in civilizations, human civilizations. So that has been true politically, economically, and socially. All right, and we revel in that, really. Our attention to sports activities today, the dominance of that in our thinking and our everyday television watching for the most part. And women have become part of that, as you now know. Women are now announcers on the football and hockey and baseball, and they're in the locker rooms with the guys, which is something that's revolutionary, but that's what's happening. But and women have been, in a sense, become fans of, many women still are not. Perhaps in this room, most of you may not be fans of that, but yet women have become fans of all these men's sports. Although women have had the value today of competing and have excelling in sporting activities. But the fact is, historically, women have been second-class citizens, or second-class people, not even citizens, because you didn't have the right to vote until this century. Women had no right to vote. They had no right to own property, except the wealthy and the people who were in the royal class, the noble class. Ordinary women had no rights before this century to any extent anyway. So it wasn't until 1920 that women, we're talking 50,000 years of human development, and it's only in the last 80 years that you women have had even the right to vote and own property. So this is a very current situation. And there are, as I said, there are pressures against that, and I'll bring those out to you. And that revolves mostly around religion, unfortunately. Many religions do not want women to have power, do not women to have the power they have now, or to have the power that they might attain in the future. I'll just bring it up to date very quickly. Back, maybe a year ago, the Pope railed against feminism and the fact that women should not participate in the church activities. This is counter to many of the thoughts of Catholic women in this country, and many men as well, but he did state specifically he did not want women to participate. Now, just a week or 2 weeks ago, I was watching a program on the tsunami disaster. Now, in that program were a bunch of clergymen, and those clergymen, there was a Muslim cleric, a Hindu cleric, a Buddhist cleric, a Jewish rabbi, a Catholic priest, and a Protestant minister. Now, they were all men. And interestingly enough, Deepak Chopra, maybe you saw this show or maybe you did not, but Deepak Chopra said, you know, how come there are no women in this panel? How come? And you know something? The evangelist Protestant minister said, they shouldn't be here. We're in charge, men. This is 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. And you know, in the Republican platform, just recently reiterated by George W. Bush, even though he disowned it at one point, now he's getting somehow ensconced in it, is this constitutional amendment banning gay marriage. Gay marriage is a first step towards other restrictions which do tend to push on keeping women down, taking away rights of people. making a constitutional amendment is in defense of marriage is a first step in my view, at least, in putting women back. Isn't the whole thing that the Taliban did in Afghanistan, did they push women back 1,000 years? Whether you're educated, whether you were a widow, you couldn't work. Whether you're educated, you couldn't teach or work. You couldn't touch men. You can't do anything related to earning a living back when the Taliban controlled Afghanistan. And there are many fundamentalist Muslims who want that to prevail. We're in a struggle for that today. There are many fundamentalist Christians that want that as well. And the evangelists, some of the sects, I don't know about many, preach no women in the clergy, no women. Women, it was brought out in several speeches a year or two ago at conventions where they said women are here to help men. So this is not an idle thought. These people do have power and are gaining power. So it is not something that you can sit back and say, we've attained this and we're going to carry on and get our equal measure. Not necessarily so, because things can change. And even though success has been rampant, that doesn't mean nothing stands still, and nothing is more standard than change, okay? But it can be changed this way, it can be changed that way. And so you all have to be on guard, your children, your grandchildren, to protect some of those rights. You know, it wasn't until the last 20 or so years that all women got the right to participate in athletics to the point that they do now. You know, there was no funding for women's softball or women's track or women's basketball or women's hockey. All the women now in most of the major universities participate or have the opportunity to participate in any athletic endeavor. All the money used to go to football. In many universities, there was only money for football, even for the men. They could only have money to fund the football team and the coaches, and not any other sports. They call them minor sports. But now, because of equality laws, and it's the laws that now force the universities to spend money on women's athletics, to the benefit of women and to the benefit of everybody. Because number one, they have a better view of themselves, they have a better healthy attitude physically of themselves as well. And they do participate very vigorously, as you, I'm sure, are aware. Yes? Oh, I thought you had a question. All right, so that's what's happened. But traditionally, religion has kept women down. No matter how we put it, and with all the stories of the biblical women who were so, and we do read about them in the Bible on a constant basis, they're in the prayers, right? But women are still held as second-class citizens by many, many people in this world. Even though they were held up as ideals, the Greeks, the Romans had these idealized women, right? Venus, Aphrodite, Athena, so many of them. But the ordinary women didn't have those same rights, didn't have the same opportunities. That has changed, and that has been, I think, to the benefit of society and civilization. Women, for the most part, have been the glue of civilization. They have, in many hundreds of years, thousands of years, men marched off to war. They left the women and the children home. Who kept civilization going? It wasn't the men, they were out fighting. They were out doing other things. And for the most part, that's the civilizing force within the overall development of civilization. So my point tonight is that we have to continue that and forward that and fight that so that the power of regression doesn't gain more of a foothold, because the power of regression does have a foothold. You have to understand that. Now, women have always made, as I said, their mark on history, and these lists give you so many, so many. And I just want to address that from a history book point of view. In our history books, there are many references to so many people, but you never saw many references to the famous women, the women that really achieved. Because history books, you know, there are 10 things happening in history, only 2 make it into the book, right? And somebody makes history by only emphasizing certain things in history. If you read a history book of, let's say, 1900 to 2000 in France, it's a different history book than if it's in the United States. It's a different history book if it's in Saudi Arabia. Everything's written for their point of view. And therefore, the standard item that may have happened may not be reflected in all of these different history books. So even in our history book, blacks never had much say, but blacks had a very big importance in this country, more than we ever knew, and even today don't even know. More and more it comes out all the time. It's the same with women. And that is changing, hopefully, maybe not fast enough for some, and maybe too fast for others, but that is a debatable item. Women have always been known to be the hand behind it now, the throne, so to speak. And women have learned to control men by not being, in a sense, physically dominating, because they couldn't be. So they had certain attributes of women have been developed because of the need to survive and the need to have support for their children and for themselves, and not to have men philandering, although we know philandering is a standard as we find more about what's happening in the world. But the fact is that changed much in this century, in the last 50 years. Betty Friedan and others in the feminism movement have raised the consciousness of women and permitted freedom, sexual freedom, as well as freedom to earn and promote and gain acceptance at highest levels. Condoleezza Rice was on television all day today, the new Secretary of State. Whether you like her or don't like her, that's an achievement, just like Madeleine Albright was there. But there are other people. This is the tip of the iceberg. Nine governors are women, 9 out of 50. That's, it wasn't too long ago there were none. Now there are 9. So they're being recognized as people who have skill politically and some concept of what to do for the population. University presidents. There weren't only the university presidents that were women until recently were maybe Smith, Wellesley, the women's schools of the country. Well, Duke, University of Chicago, Miami University, Brown, Princeton, Penn, Michigan, Syracuse. There are women presidents now. There are 11 now in major universities. I'm sure there are many, many more. I just picked out 11 major universities. So there is that march forward. There is this march towards the equality, if you will. Now, that's a threat for some people, and it's an opportunity, obviously, for others. But this freedom, all right, this freedom is something I think, in my view, is positive. It is moving the world together. We have, now is it breaking down this mystique between, well, we know that mystique has broken down, don't we? I mean, when I went to college, you couldn't have a woman come to your room after 6 o'clock. I mean, then they changed the rules. You had to leave the door open. If you had a visiting guy, if it was a woman, or a visiting gal, if you're and then all of a sudden they have them living together and using the same bathrooms. So it's a different world than what you and I grew up with. Good or bad, that's the way it is. We hope that it's for good. We hope that there's like my daughter has boy friends that are friends, and they're not lovers or dates, they're friends. This is a new thing, because I didn't know from that when I was younger, and maybe you didn't either. It was a different kind of mystique, arm's length operation. Today, we're all considering ourselves more and more, the young people, as human beings. That's positive. That's positive. It's to the benefit of society. Because brains are not, we're finding out, brains are not better or worse depending on sex, race, or anything else. It's based on education. I mean, this is becoming apparent to those enlightened people, and some people will hold prejudices till they die, but the world is moving ahead. Many, many, many corporations today are either headed by women or have women in very, very key positions. And this goes for all, not just fashion, but in General Motors, in Ford, in highly technical pharmaceutical companies. It's across the board. Brains are brains, and we're taking advantage of that. Civilization will benefit from that. But there are still people that said, what? Women aren't supposed to be here. That's what this, I heard him, to Deepak Chopra's comment, where there's not one woman here. They're not supposed to be here. We're in charge. Men. And the Pope said, the drive for equality makes homosexuality and heterosexuality virtually equivalent. So the point is, even though he has forbidden women taking part in becoming priests, okay? There are some people who want that. So the point is that homosexuality is sort of an inkling as to what would be if they do win that battle. And they are, with so much problems on our hands, with so many problems in medical things, Medicare, in Social Security, in wars, they're concentrating their effort on homosexuality. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like there must be another reason behind it. And that's my thought on it. Now, maybe some of you people have your thoughts on some of the topics upon which I've touched today. Do we have the microphone? Could you come down here with that, please? This lady here has a question. Would you identify yourself, please?
My name is Beatrice Minikis. My question is that I have read that the Greek people weren't prejudiced against homosexuality. I don't know the real history.
Well, the ancient Greek people were not. That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
Were men and women both free?
In Sparta, the women were free, but most Greek women were not. The men were free to have sex with other men. But, you know, that
we have regressed in that.
Regressed?
We have regressed because then it went out of style.
I don't know what regression means in that case.
Well, it was condemned. Like even recently, this governor in New Jersey resigned because he was an admitted
homosexual. Well, you know, that's an isolated case, and my point is, first of all, I'm not for homosexuality, but I'm against a constitutional amendment that forbids sexual partnerships. You can be against something, but not officially in the Constitution. The Constitution is to give freedom to people. The only negative amendment in the Constitution is what? Prohibition. But there's another amendment that says, no, we eliminated that amendment. All the other amendments are giving freedom to women, freedom to blacks, freedom to us as citizens. Now they want to put a negative amendment in again. I'm against that. So homosexuality has always existed, and I'm not here to discuss homosexuality. I'm here to discuss that as a point that the fundamentalists are making. It's easier to fight that than to state right away, openly, and broadcast it everywhere, that we're really against women. But they've stated it in conventions, the Baptist convention down south, the Pope here said it, and I heard an evangelistic minister say it. They shouldn't be here. We're in charge. That's what I mean. Some things are put up, and it's a smokescreen for some other more harsh thoughts. That's my view anyway. Yes?